This is Chapter 1, Section 4, Statistical Notation. Pause this slide and see if you can work these problems, then come back for your answers. So to write 1/6 as a decimal, you should have used your calculator and done 1 divided by 6 to get 0.1667. For problem 2, of means multiply. So in your calculator, you would do 1 divided by 4 times 64 to get 16. For express 1/9 as a percent, you would have first changed it to 1 divided by 9 in your calculator, and then to change the percent, you just multiply that decimal by 100. For the next one, determine 30% of 120. So 30% in your calculator, to go back to a decimal, you would do 30 divided by 100. That would give you 0.3, and then you would times it by 120 to get 36. The next one, express 1/4 as a percent, decimal, and fraction. Again, 25%, 0.25, and 1/4. For the next one, express 0.5% as a proportion. First, you would say percent means divide by 100, so 0.5 over 100. And then to get rid of the 0.5, you'd multiply the top and bottom both by 10. So you'd get 0.005, which would be 5 over 1,000. The last problem is just order of operations. Please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. So parentheses first, then addition and subtraction from left to right, and then finally what's underneath the entire division sign. You would get 7. Statistical notation. Statistics uses some special notation. Scores are referred to as X, or if you have more than one score for a person, you would have X and Y. When 2 scores are recorded, use X and Y for the score names. Here's an example using height and weight for different people. When 1 score is recorded, just use X. For example, here's some quiz scores for some students. N with a capital N is the number of scores in a population. Lowercase n is the number of scores in a sample. Many statistical procedures involve summing or adding up a set of scores. The summation sign sigma stands for summation. It means add them up. The summation is followed by a symbol or equation that defines what is to be summed up. So let's go over the order of operations. In statistics, we add a new one in. So please excuse my dear sum Aunt Sally. We have to add some in there. So parentheses are still number 1. Exponents come next. Multiply and divide from left to right. But now we're adding in a 4th one, summation. Finally, the 5th thing you do is add and subtract left to right. So summation always comes before adding and subtracting. You have to remember that for statistics. Here's an example. Find, for part A, the summation, parentheses x plus 3, and then squared. Well, the order of operations says we do what's in parentheses first. So x plus 3. Look at your table over here. First, you would start with the column of scores. You would label it X at the top, and you would put the 4 scores. So I would have scores of 4, 8, 2, and 6 that I was given. So this is how I would set my problem up. So the first thing I would do for those scores is list them out under X. Next thing I would do is in order of operations, I need to do X plus 3. So I need to make an X plus 3 column. And then I need to add 3 to every single original X score. So since I started with 4, I add 3 to it and get 7. My next score is 8. I add 3 to it and get 11, and so forth for the rest of the scores. All right, let's look at problem A again. Exponents would come next in order of operations. Parentheses and then exponents. Well, the exponents here is a 2. I need to square everything in parentheses. So my entire x plus 3 column, I need to square those numbers. So to do this, I make another column, and I label it with x plus 3 in parentheses, squared, And then I take all of the numbers in the x plus 3 column, the 7, the 11, the 5, and the 9, and I square each number for my new column. Finally, in part A, I have to do the summation of x plus 3 squared. So I need to sum up every number in the x plus 3 squared column. So if I add up 49, 121, 25, and 81, I'm going to get 276. And that's my answer to part A. Let's look at part B. It just says summation of x squared. Again, order of operations, exponents comes first, then summation. So all I would need for this problem is the original x column and a new column called x squared. So I would take the original numbers 4, 8, 2, and 6, and I would square them all and put those answers in a new column called x squared. I would end up with 16, 64, 4, and 36. And finally, for part B, I need to do the summation of that x squared column. I add those four numbers up, I get 120. That's my answer. Now let's look at part C. It's a little different. In parentheses, it has summation of x, and then on the outside it has squared. Well, I have to do what's inside the parentheses first, so I have to sum up the x scores. So I go back to my original column of x's that has the numbers 4, 8, 2, and 6, and I sum those up. So my summation of x would be equal to 20 when I added those numbers up. Step 2 of that problem would be to take that summation of x of 20, and because that's what's in parentheses, and then I would square it. So 20 squared would give me 400 as my answer for part C. And remember, when you square a negative number, the number always becomes positive. So if I had negative 2 squared, my answer would be positive 4. Here's another example. Pause the video, see if you can make your table using these 4 scores, and see if you can work part A through F, and then open it back up and see if you got the same answers I did. Remember, for these problems, you're going to have to make separate columns depending on what the questions are asking you for. So in this problem, I had to make an x squared column to answer some of the questions. I had to make an x minus 1 column to answer some of the questions. And I had to make an x minus 1 squared column to answer some of the questions. Here's another example with scores of x and y for 4 different people. Let's look at how you would find summation of x. Well, you'd do it the same way you did before. You'd add up all the scores in the x column. For part B, summation of y, same as you did before. You'd add up all the scores in the y column. 5 plus 3 plus 4 plus 2 would be 14. Finally, summation of x plus y, x times y. So summation of x, y means multiply them together. So I would take and make a third column. I would call it xy, and I would multiply what's in x by what's in y and get a new xy. So the first one for person A would be 3 times 5 would be 15. Person B, 1 times 3 would be 3, and so forth and so on. And finally, I would sum up that column to get 54. Remember, order of operations says multiplication is before summation. These are your practice problems. Go ahead and see if you can do these. The part 3 can be a little tricky. So try to work these on your own and then come back and look at my answers after. This problem 2 is asking you in order of operations what comes first. For part 3, you're having to use words and put into symbols. So for part A, add 4 points to each score and then add the resulting values would be parentheses x plus 4, and then you'd put a summation on the outside. For part B, add the scores and then square the total. So add the scores would be first, summation of x in parentheses, and then a squared. Part C, square each score and then add the squared values. So summation parentheses x squared parentheses, or you could just say summation of x squared. Because exponents come before summation anyway, you don't really need parentheses in part C.